yes, this is the first year of having this core roster together. But nevertheless, they absolutely should have expectations. This is one of the best cores in the league. Every Knicks creator would agree with that and agreed with that. You have two MVP candidates, both currently top 10 offensive impact players, literally the best point guard in the East, literally the best center in the East to go along with. You have two elite 3-and-D wings, both 37% career three-point shooters, both all defense recipients in their careers. You have the ultimate glue guy, as everybody would agree, that a guy who is uniquely multi-talented, who can put pressure on the rim, who can pass like a guard, who can lead breaks, one of the best rebounders in the history of the NBA at his size. This is somebody you have that's shooting 38% from three this season. You have a high-level point of attack defender who shoots 47% on wide open threes. This is all on the same team. Not to mention, you have an all-time elite rebounder and strong rim protector coming back from injury, potentially, hopefully, in time to get ramped up for the postseason. And you have no expectations? What? How do you put all that together and you have no expectations? This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. And we have a lot to talk about with the Knicks right now. They have obviously hit a bit of a rough patch. And while we have some, venting to do, I think potentially, we could also potentially have more of a optimistic outlook than most analysts, at least right now, because you guys know in our audience that we are very much process oriented when we look at this team and any team really. But first, I did want to say, it feels like yesterday, Geoff, when we were approaching 1,000 subscribers and our audience helped us hit that milestone so quickly. Well, in about a fifth of the time, we are approaching 2,000 subscribers. It's ridiculous. It's incredible. It's really cool that we're building such a unique community at Hot Hand Theory, a place where you all take the time to listen to us and drop comments with your perspectives. And we take the time to then thoughtfully respond back to each and every one of you guys. So I think it's a little different than almost any other NBA podcast or YouTube channel or platform, really. And we're going to continue to push the boundaries of, traditional notions about the game and try to have deep level analysis and incorporating your perspectives into our views. And, it's not possible without you guys. So if this is your first time listening, or if you're coming back to listen and you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe and join our crazy growing community and drop a comment. We'll definitely get back to you. And yeah, we appreciate all of you. Anything you want to say, Geoff?
Yeah, that last Kings episode was so cool because I think it is emblematic of what we're trying to do. You see Knicks fans pop in, and even they're not discussing, the stuff, the theories and some of the principles we discussed in the Kings episode. They're not saying, oh, trade Keon Ellis to the Knicks. They're discussing it more in how, the synergy and the 3-and-D type stuff, how that can be infused into any team. And, XJ and I are both lifelong Knicks fans, but there's plenty of content out there for people who want to go and want to, vent about the Knicks in a way that is from the perspective of a Knicks fan. I think what we're trying to bring is a more analytical and objective perspective. So when we do talk about the Knicks, yes, probably there's a bias there because a bias exists for everyone. But we're doing our best to, tackle it from a different angle, and the response has been so overwhelmingly positive. So yeah, just appreciative to everyone and help us get to 2K. It's another fun milestone. I like even numbers, round numbers.
I like round numbers too. The Knicks have not done well in not a round number, which is the last 7 games in which the Knicks are 2-5. They actually have a 118.3 offensive rating and a 118.4 defensive rating, meaning that they are actually a net negative team over the last 7 games. Probably the only 7-game stretch this season where that's been the case. They are down to 27th in the league in frequency of shots coming from 3-point range. But they are up to fourth in the league in frequency of shots coming at the rim. There's something to talk about there. Shooting a horrific 31% on threes during this stretch of time. But they have taken a solid 69% of making 69% of their shots at the rim. And despite not giving up many threes at all, teams are shooting 41% from three against them over this stretch. Geoff, always got to start with you and your perspectives. What key issues have we been seeing for the Knicks? Is it some fundamental flaw with the roster? Is it Cat at the 5 that needs to change? We're starting to hear some of that trickle in about, this is why the Timberwolves gave up the farm for Rudy Gobert. Is it as simple as just shooting variance? Like, what is happening here? What are the issues that we're seeing going on with the Knicks for, responsible for this recent stretch?
I'm going to start with someone who I think is going to catch you and our whole audience off guard. We haven't really talked about this, and I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are. When I rewatched that Pistons game last night, to me, the center of the issues right now is OG Anunoby. And
not catching me off guard at all. I had the same note, and so we're on the same exact page.
And that's going to sound bananas to people who are loyal to this podcast and just know XJ and I. We love OG Anunoby. We went on the Strickland podcast before last season together when we were, advertising our show before it came on. And both of us were like, yeah, you trade OG for RJ every day of the week. And we caught a bunch of flack for it. Like, we've been on the OG Anunoby trade from day -1. The OG is, in our minds, the perfect type of player if you're not going to be a traditional star. In theory, he brings elite shooting from both wings. He's added in a little bit of above the break shooting this year. He's huge, and he can help you defensively both on and off the ball. He's an elite defender at his best. This is exactly, in theory, if you were building a team with Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson as your first and second best player, I don't know if you could construct in a lab a more perfect third player than OG Anunoby. The theoretical build of this Knicks team is perfect. And yet, you look at the data, you watch the film, OG's got his worst defensive EPM since 2019, I think. He's got his worst defensive LeBron since the same year. He was elite before he became a Knick, the 3 seasons before he became a Knick. The Knicks defense this season, XJ, has been better when he's not on the court, which, there's a lot of noise there. As everybody knows with the Knicks minutes, it's tough to really gauge on and off stuff. But even with the Knicks extreme minutes weighting, there should still be some noticeable trends. If OG is the impactful defender that we think he is, the team should be hurt in the minutes he doesn't play. But it hasn't been that way this season. And I don't know if that's about role. I'm sure we'll talk about Tom Thibodeau and some things that he, some areas he might be coming up short later in the show. But I think for the most part, OG Anunoby defensively is playing the role that the Knicks want him to play. They put him on Cade at the end of the game last night, and to me, you want him at the point of attack in certain matchups, like when the Knicks play the Celtics. Look, it's not fair to ask Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges to take on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum the whole game, as OG Anunoby is just the weak side low man the whole game. I get that is his ideal role, but OG is going to have to take some of these point of attack possessions. That's part of what he's supposed to bring. This is, you look at the whole, yes, OG Anunoby's ideal role is that weak side low man because he is the Band-Aid for this team. Anytime there's a mistake, he is there to clean it up, and I think he's been put in that position. Actually, I don't know what you think. I have a couple theories, but he just has not been as effective in any of his roles defensively, and it's starting to affect his offense.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. You mentioned him having some of his lowest impact, especially defensively, since 2019. And I know that season, he had a ton of injuries, the kind of nagging injuries that were going on. He had some personal things going on, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that being his second season in the NBA. And outside of that, this is by far, at least so far, his worst defensive season and his worst overall season in his entire career so far. So, and I think that's jarring. I think that, you know, I have, and we have here on this podcast, like, you know, a few episodes ago, talking about indicators around his defense specifically, and it not looking good, and there being some concerns. And why are we seeing some of these signals? What does it actually mean? You know, there's been a lot of people who have been saying earlier in the season, you know, OG's been the best player on the team, even better than Karl Anthony, even better than Jalen Brunson. And I'm just like, I don't know, seeing that. And it has not, you know, he was having really strong shooting performances early in the season. I think that was buoying a lot of how people were looking at him, but that's fallen off. And now there's just a really big spotlight on his defense in particular. And the confusion around switching is prevalent literally every game. There's like multiple mistakes in terms of like whether they should switch or not, either with Josh Hart, either with Mikal Bridges. There just seems to be schematic confusion. I don't think it makes sense for that to happen 41 games into the season, literally at the halfway point of the season, in a situation where the Knicks team and starting lineup has played together more than literally any other starting lineup in the entire league, by far. And so you would think that they would have a lot of this stuff ironed out, but there's still confusion. There's still overhelping. There's still OG ending up in the wrong spot. There's the poor on-ball defense. He seems to have lost a step. He can still, you know, kind of do battle with the bigger wings in the situations where we're talking about like a Giannis or a type like that. That seems to be his best matchup. Otherwise, he just is sort of struggling all across the board. And it is something that I think has been going on all season and has just taken a bigger spotlight maybe in the last, you know, month or two. So, or few weeks, I should say. So yeah, I don't know what the actual cause is, and it could be a lot of those things. It could just be like, you know, confusion about what his responsibilities are, which is what my hypothesis is. But there definitely also seems to be some physical aspect to it as well, in terms of like, he just doesn't seem like he can guard guys on the ball. Like, you know, we saw Cade Cunningham really just do whatever he wanted with OG Anunoby, and that's not something we've seen throughout his career. So we've seen OG Anunoby completely shut down big guards and wings throughout his career, completely take the ball away from them not even be able to dribble against OG Anunoby. And I think it may be so long since we've seen that happen that some people have forgotten how much of an elite lockdown on-ball defender and off-ball defender that OG Anunoby has been. But he hasn't been that. And so it is very concerning to me.
I mean, there was a possession last night, XJ. The Knicks had all the momentum. Cade Cunningham wasn't even on the court. The Knicks had cut it to 2. And the Pistons ran a weave to get Ron Holland downhill against OG Anunoby. Yeah. And he just completely dusted OG Anunoby to set up a floater. Cat was there waiting for the help, just whiffed on the block. And the momentum the Knicks had was gone. Cade Cunningham came back in the game a possession later with the Pistons still having a lead. You talked about the miscommunications. There was a possession where Tobias Harris was the ball handler. OG Anunoby and Karl Anthony Towns in the pick and roll. OG thought that they were switching. Karl Anthony Towns thought they were in drop. Tobias Harris walks into a pull-up 3. There were multiple ghost screens set where OG thought that Josh Hart was going to take the ball handler even on the ghost screen, and OG stopped for just a second, and that gave the ball handler an easy path into the basket to create easy looks for their team. Just mistakes you don't expect from OG Anunoby, and it's all adding up to his overall impact being as low as we've ever seen. And I don't really know what the solution is besides OG just play better. He has to play better. The team isn't going to be the championship contender that we think he is if he's not at his best. You mentioned that, you know, some of it might be just the miscommunications. My hypothesis actually is he's just overtaxed. He hasn't missed a game. He's playing the more minutes than he ever has from a volume perspective. I think they got to get him off the court more, whether that's an entire game or just reeling back in his minutes. I think if he's looking like this at the halfway mark, I don't know how he's going to play 4 rugged playoff series for 38, 40 minutes a game that should be expected of him in a playoff series. This is the thing. This is a common misunderstanding about the minutes. I want guys like Bridges and Hart and OG Anunoby to be out there for 38, 40, 42 minutes in a playoff game, in a playoff series, in an entire playoff run. The regular season is ramping up for that. But if he can't play 36 effective minutes against Detroit in game 41, how the hell is he going to play enough to win 16 playoff games in 4 months?
It's a great question. Halfway through the season, he has not gotten a game off. He has not gotten his minutes reduced other than in blowouts. And at what point is it going to happen? Are we in a situation where, and it's weird because like I haven't really thought about it in this explicitly. Are we in a situation where the only way OG Anunoby like sits for time is if he gets injured? Like is he going to play 82 games if he doesn't get hurt? That would be jarring, the idea that OG Anunoby would just play 82 games this season at 36 minutes per game unless he gets hurt. I just can't believe that's going to be the organizational approach for a team that's trying to compete for a title, which I don't know. If you hear some people talk about it, maybe there's no intention to compete for a title here this season. And
it's wild. I don't understand people. Like I don't get, this is so clearly a championship team. And I don't understand the motivations of those people who are like, you know what? Never mind. Forget the December net rating. This actually isn't a championship team. We got to wait until next season. No, this is a championship team. You just have to push the right buttons. And one of those is making sure that your third most important player and your first and second and fourth and fifth, you have to make sure that they are as healthy and as rested as can be for the playoffs. And a counter that I see all the time, and I'm sorry, folks, but this is going to be maybe an unhinged rant, but a counter that I see to this all the time is, what is Tibbs supposed to do? The bench stinks. Let me tell you something, people. Landry Shamet didn't just forget how to play basketball. All right. He's 26 years old. Yes, he's coming off an injury. Dude has 5 straight seasons of being in the 45th to 77th percentile in EPM. He has shot 37% or better from 3 in 5 straight seasons. He did shoot 37% or better from 3 in 5 straight seasons. This guy can be your 9th man. He can give you 12 to 15 minutes a game. But in Tibbs' 5 seasons, or 5 plus seasons or whatever, how many examples do the Knicks have of guys who are otherwise good basketball players coming off the bench for Tibbs and not being good basketball players? How many more examples do the Knicks need to see? Whether it's Obi Toppin, whether it's Dante DiVincenzo when he was coming off the bench. Remember the conversations we were having about DiVincenzo before he was plopped in the starting lineup? When it was Quentin Grimes when he was moved to the bench. How many more players do we need to see have their minutes jerked around coming off the bench because Tibbs doesn't trust them before we understand that a player's ability to impact the game is somewhat dictated on rhythm and consistency of role? That matters. If you come into the game for 4 minutes and your coach says, sorry, if you miss a help, if you miss a rotation, if a guy back cuts you, if you miss a shot because your job is to be out there for a shot, if you miss one shot, you're coming out of the game and never going back in, that's going to affect your overall play. No other team is doing this. And by the way, every other team doesn't have good bench players. Every other team doesn't have a good bench. It's not like this is some unique issue to the Knicks. Let's just say, hypothetically, Landry Shamet did slightly forget how to play basketball and is just a worse basketball player. You think that there are other teams out there who, when their bench is on the court, their coach is like, man, I'd way rather have Donovan Mitchell on the court right now. You think he wants Sam Merrill out there? Like, theoretically, you think he wouldn't want Donovan Mitchell on the court all the time, out there all the time? No. But he puts him out there because there are greater goals in play here for every team, almost every team. Obviously, every team isn't trying to win a championship. There is a greater goal in play. The Knicks are one of the handful of teams whose ceiling lines up with winning a championship. They, more than just about any other team, should be prioritizing these major goals. And to look at a guy like Landry Shamet and just be like, sorry, I don't trust you because you're not playing perfect every single time. Just got to go with McCall and OG for 22 out of 24 minutes every single half and run them into the ground. It's just short-sighted. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And to be honest, it's not how you're going to win a championship with this unit of players.
Yeah, that was a well worthwhile rant because you're right. I mean, what is the approach here? What is the larger goal? Like, how are you coming up with these with this ideology of where, you know, a guy comes in the game and if he doesn't play perfectly over his 2-minute stint, he has to come out and go to the guys that you trust. Like, this is not a sustainable way to operate. And to be fair, you know, Tibbs has done some version of this throughout his career, but I don't think it's been this extreme. Like you mentioned, some guys who didn't get a lot of minutes and time, and you know, maybe they were younger players or newer players to his system and he didn't trust them right away and this and that. But even that, like, this is extreme relative to those other situations. So I'm not really sure what's going on, what the message is organizationally, what the message is from the front office, like what their larger goals are. But this all doesn't really seem to add up to me, and so it is a little confusing to me. So I think it's something that people need to talk about more, and so I'm glad that you brought it up. For me, you know, I kind of mentioned about the title expectations that should be on this team, but people are trying to deflect it away from, which is really strange to me. You know, I've been calling it the year zero conspiracy, and I'm sorry, and you and I were ironically talking about conspiracies before we started recording for some reason. But I'm calling this a conspiracy because there seems to be like some concerted effort, cooperative effort to effectively undermine the idea that the Knicks should have expectations this season, which is so bizarre.
Dude, there has to be a group chat that we're not in. Like the whole world.
Yeah.
They all just the same day woke up one day and were like, nah. They're using the same wording too. Yeah, it's crazy.
The same wording. It's literally like every Knicks outlet, analyst, pundit, beat writer, reporter, all after one or the other was like within a 48-hour time frame. It's just like the Knicks were never expected to win this year. You know, it's never going to be this year. Like let's entirely relieve them from expectations. I'm just like, Geoff, like, how did we get here? This was not the conversation from the beginning of the season. Yes, this is the first year of having this core roster together. But nevertheless, they absolutely should have expectations. This is one of the best cores in the league. Every Knicks creator would agree with that and agreed with that. You have 2 MVP candidates, both currently top 10 offensive impact players. Literally the best point guard in the East, literally the best center in the East. To go along with, you have 2 elite 3-and-D wings, both 37% career 3-point shooters, both all defense recipients in their careers. You have the ultimate glue guy, as everybody would agree, that a guy who is uniquely multi-talented, who can put pressure on the rim, who can pass like a guard, who can lead breaks, one of the best rebounders in the history of the NBA at his size. This is somebody you have that's shooting 38% from 3 this season. You have a high-level point of attack defender who shoots 47% on wide open threes. This is all on the same team. Not to mention, you have an all-time elite rebounder and strong rim protector coming back from injury, potentially, hopefully, in time to get ramped up for the postseason. And you have no expectations? What? How do you put all that together and you have no expectations? No, I want to be clear. It's obviously not title or bust. It's obviously not that, but if the Knicks lose in the first or second round and it's not a tough series against the Cavs or the Celtics, this is a failure of a season. You can't lose to you're going to lose to a late surging Sixers or like a up and coming, Pacers or a Magic squad that just got healthy, or dear God, if you lose to like a Detroit or like an Atlanta team or something like that, guys, like teams that are not even, at the level of where they're trying to get to yet. Or if you lose players from, to injuries from overuse, or the team just got super gassed because they were playing more minutes than any other core in the league. If everyone is on the same page about that those losses would be horrible. It doesn't matter if it's year 0 or year 1-0, that there's concrete expectations for this team. And we should not diminish that by saying, oh, well, they weren't going to win a title this year anyway. It doesn't make any sense.
That was perfect. I feel like the guy in old school. That was just, I have no response. That was perfect. I think we know deep down at its core what the motivation for a lot of these outlet and analysts is, which is I'll let the audience put it together. We know what they're trying to guard against.
No, you have to say it. You have to say, because then
nobody wants to have the real conversation about why they might come up short this season, because that opens a can of worms, which is that the coach might not be the right coach. But at some point, when do we reach the point? So they get another bench player this offseason? Is that the point? Is that they don't have, like, I don't even know how they're going to acquire a good enough. When are they going to? I asked John this question last week, and I think it was, and I thought John gave a good answer. Are they going to acquire a guy this summer that Tibbs is going to look at late in the third quarter and be like, I'd rather have him on the court right now than Mikal Bridges? Who's that player? When is that going to happen? So I don't know. And then, by the way, it's the ultimate catch-22. If these games don't matter because it's year zero, why the hell is everybody playing over 40 minutes a game? Is there no tax? Like, are these minutes not going to add up later in their careers? Was Luol Deng not a thing? Is that not something that happened? We're actively shortening these guys' primes. So ask one of these people that. Why are we actively shortening the primes of players in a season that isn't supposed to mean anything anyways? You can't have it both ways. Either it means something or it doesn't. This season absolutely means something. I don't know why we're the only two who see this team as the true title contender. You just have to start operating like a team that's trying to win a championship.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you don't want stakes when you don't want accountability. And that's, in my opinion, I agree with you. I think that's what we're seeing. It's sort of like a lot of people don't want accountability for the results of this season. And so with that, you say, well, there's no stakes. It's a free roll. Whatever happens is what we would expect to happen. And so we just keep it pushing. But I don't think you can do that. I think you need to have accountability for this season. I think this is a title contender, and they definitely have to compete like they are right now. They're not being operated like one. They're not being managed like one. They're being managed in a situation where, playing against the Detroit Pistons, who are just like, maybe they're even early, like they've just put some space around Cade Cunningham, and now he's blossoming into a star, potentially moving towards superstar level player. And they're not playing their guys this many minutes. Like, they don't care about the postseason right now. They're trying to win. They're where the Knicks were 2 years ago. And
actually, without Jaden Ivey, no good second creator, Cade Cunningham came out at the 6-minute mark last night with a 6-point in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
At the 6-minute mark. JB Bickerstaff said, "I'm not playing Cade the whole fourth quarter. It's January," and the team of Marcus Sasser, Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, and Malik Beasley, who amazing shooter, but that fivesome beat the Knicks starters for a couple minutes and held the fort, because that is something that can happen when you empower the non-core, when you empower these players and say, yeah, I'm going to trust you and you're going to play through some mistakes. That is a thing that can happen. And I want to be clear, by the way, this isn't just on Tibbs anymore. People call this year zero. This is year 5 of Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose. Year 5. And Tom Thibodeau is a 67-year-old man who's had a ton of success. He was the architect of a defense that shut down LeBron James before LeBron went to Miami, that won a championship in Boston. Doc Rivers still talks about it this day. He goes to Chicago. That Chicago team could have very well won a championship if Derrick Rose doesn't have that gruesome injury in 2012. Tom Thibodeau has had a ton of success. It is almost unreasonable to expect a man like him to just wake up one day and be like, you know what? My philosophy, so the hell with it. I'm just going to completely override it. That is not reasonable. And do I think that maybe he can be a little bit more flexible? And yes, I do. But at a certain point, this is on the front office to say, look, we got to do something here. We're trying to win a championship. We've given you a championship team. This is a championship roster. It can't just be these 5 guys or nothing.
Yeah, it's just on the money. I mean, we obviously have a lot of, I guess I would call them complaints, or just things that we're not agreeing with or that don't really add up. But I'm sure our audience would be like, okay, we hear you, we hear your perspective, as we always like to share. Where the Knicks go? Like, what should they actually be doing then? Obviously they have a rough patch, but I think at least, some of it is, in my opinion, some variance as far as what we're seeing in terms of defensively, the shooting luck that opponents are having against them. I don't think all of it is just something that's going to be sustainable and continue. But at the same time, I do think there are issues here that do really need to get ironed out and that could get ironed out. To me, the biggest one that I notice right now is the 3-point rate issue. This is a huge issue. I know people are like talking it down. And when I've talked about it before, the Knicks won a game where they shot very few threes, and immediately everybody leaves comments on my profile saying, I thought the Knicks needed to shoot 40 threes in order to win every game. It's okay. That's obviously not what I said. Hopefully our audience understands that's not ever what I would say. It is about over the long haul in terms of your aggression from three dictates so much, not only, your rate of scoring, because obviously 3 is greater than 2, but also the way that you're able to create space with the threat of the 3-point shot. They've been able to leverage their spacing to get to the rim to some extent, but they're forgetting about the punishment part. The punishment part is important, which is when teams are kind of selling out or putting extra effort towards defending the rim, or in the Knicks case, in many situations, the short mid-range shot, they have to punish them from 3. And everyone's asking, well, how can they get their 3-point rate up? They haven't been able to really do it all season. If anything, it's just gone backwards. And to me, the answer is really obvious. And the answer is the same answer that I've had at the beginning of the season. It is something that also, incidentally, or maybe even, to you, Geoff, a primary reason for it will also help address a lot of the wing minute issues that we've seen throughout the year, something that we've talked about repeatedly. And that is, yes, I still think this is the way forward. Move Deuce McBride into the starting lineup for Josh Hart. And unsurprisingly, I have some data. One is that the biggest swing, or one of the biggest swings in terms of the Knicks 3-point rate, is whether or not Deuce McBride is on the court. When Deuce is on the court, the Knicks 3-point frequency goes up 6.2% relative to when he's off the court. He and Payne really drive it, but Deuce is really the one that obviously brings great point of attack defense and screen navigation that the Knicks are really missing. And Deuce starting allows Bridges to move to kind of a wing stopper role, helper role, and generally guard less super quick and shifty guards. Another benefit that could help his longevity as well as the Knicks' overall defense. But also, this is a really important part, and this is something I wanted to talk about. I have a small sample size of 167 possessions. Deuce, Bridges, OG, Towns, plus any of either Brunson, Payne, or Kolek is plus 24.8 points per 100 possessions, including an offensive rebound rate in the 92nd percentile and a defensive rebound rate in the 100th percentile for all 4-man pairings who have played over 100 possessions. And I think this is really important to clarify because people conflate a bit a point of talking about sample size. And I think we've pushed to a point where people really dismiss things on low sample size data. But oftentimes, the goal of having a larger sample size is to increase our confidence that things have stabilized. So that means that, we have confidence that what we've seen occur will continue to occur as more events transpire. It increases your confidence that what we're seeing is not simply due to luck or primarily to luck. However, you cannot have a larger sample size without having a larger sample. A 150 possession sample is sort of like an A/B test. It's not rigorous data, but it can help us get a sense of something like, does this lineup just immediately get obliterated on the boards? No. Okay, well then maybe it's worth continuing to try to see what happens as we expand the sample. And I think that's really important because I see so much pushback about, oh, well, the sample size, just dismiss it. It's not dismiss it. This is something that shows that there could be something to this. So we need to see the sample size grow to actually know if it's true. This is very, very promising data. It doesn't mean that this is how good the lineup is and how good it will be, but it is promising. And it does tell you maybe you should try it out. It doesn't have all the warts so far that people think it does. And let's see how it plays out over 500 possessions. And let's see where things land. And guess what? Along the way, you're saving minutes for all 3 of your key wings because of something that you've talked about, Geoff, and you can talk about it more if you'd like. And you're also getting to see a different look. You're getting to see a different lineup that could be really critical to your success in the future. There's no downside to it for me. And in my opinion, it would solve a lot of the Knicks' problems twofold.
Yeah, I still feel stronger about the rotation aspect of it. I think if you remove these Hart/Bridges at shooting guard minutes, all of the wing minutes come down because there are only 96 small forward and power forward minutes. And if the three of Hart, Bridges, and OG, who are the only three guys Tibbs trusts to play at those positions, if those are primarily where their minutes are coming from, all of a sudden that averages out to 32 minutes per person. Okay, let's say they play most of their minutes at 3 and 4, and then Tibbs closes each half with his favorite lineup of Hart in for Deuce at shooting guard. Okay, so you bump that up to an average of like 34, 35 minutes a game for each person. That's perfectly tenable. If you watch our Kings episode from last week, and I'm referencing for the second time because I think it's really high quality, we talked about this exact phenomenon with Sacramento. Keegan Murray started the season with his worst stretch of his career. He couldn't make anything. His shooting percentages are still bad. And I believe that Keegan Murray was heavily impacted by being put in a lineup with De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, and DeMar DeRozan, where basically he was the person who always was counted on, whoever it was, whether it was a guard, whether it was a wing, whoever it was, he was on that person anytime he was on the court. That is exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And I think there's a trickle-down effect that was helped when Keon Ellis started playing in lineups more with him, because all of a sudden Keon Ellis was taking the guards. Keegan Murray got to play a little bit of that off-ball helper role, and he's not chasing as much. He's not expending as much energy on the defensive end. He's red hot from 3. Could that be variance? Sure. I'm not going to 100% say that is the reason that he's all of a sudden making threes. It could just be luck. That's fine. But to me, it's intuitive. To me, it makes sense. You're spending less energy on defense. You have more energy to save on offense. You could focus on that end of the court more. Mikal Bridges is doing his absolute best to be at the point of attack, whoever it is, whether it's Cade Cunningham, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, whoever. I actually think Mikal Bridges, has he had some disappointing stretches? Absolutely. But given his role and the tax that he's had to pay in terms of how often he's on the court, I actually think he's almost lived up to what the Knicks expected from him. You put Deuce McBride next to him, and they play Philadelphia Wednesday night. All of a sudden, Mikal Bridges is spending time off the ball with OG Anunoby, and they're both in that helper role. Not only do I think the defense immediately gets better, but I think it could have a trickle-down effect where Mikal Bridges is more consistently impactful in other areas of the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's a big aspect of it. There's so many things that kind of get moved into alignment. Like the balance makes so much more sense to me when you make a move like this. And you can definitely stagger situations where Hart still spends a ton of time on the court with Karl-Anthony Towns, which makes a lot of sense. I think another thing that kind of also could potentially make sense, which is interesting, is the fact that we're seeing a ton of Precious Achiuwa minutes, and I think it makes sense because theoretically you would imagine Precious is like a better 5 or just all around player maybe than Jericho Sims, but I don't know that that's actually the case. Like I have not been a big fan of Jericho Sims at all, like really throughout his career. Early in his career, I was kind of excited to see what he had. But now, in terms of just looking at some of the raw data that we see, some impact data that's relatively small sample, seeing what Precious has really brought to the table, I'm not sure Jericho Sims is not just a better player outright and makes more sense for this team in terms of backing up Karl-Anthony Towns. If you're not going to play, Ariel Hukporti and just kind of get him some minutes and see what he can do over a longer haul, maybe that's just something Tibbs is not going to do. I'm also not sure why Precious is the primary option over Jericho Sims. Jericho Sims is part of some really excellent lineups for the Knicks, like some of their best lineups with over 100 possessions played, actually. He is a really good screener, a really good screen and roller, which makes sense for him to kind of pair with Jalen Brunson if you're staggering Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, which makes sense to do. And I think that that's something that could really help on the margins, maybe not make a huge difference. But I'm really not sure why he's been sort of relegated to oblivion and just talked about as like, somebody that the Knicks are just trying to move off of in a trade. Is that what do you think about that? Because I haven't put a ton of thought into it before I just recognized, that this has been going on.
I can see the trade-offs both ways. I don't know if I feel quite as strongly or if it's as demonstrative as you seem to feel, but to me, this just highlights that the number one issue with the Knicks right now is the minutes. Because I think they have to do whatever will allow their coach to feel the most comfortable with having these 5 guys on the court less. That is my answer. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out. It's not really analysis. But I just think that, Precious brings certain strengths. Sims brings certain strengths. The data this season favors Sims. I agree with that. And so I can see the perspective that you're sharing. But at the end of the day, I think you have to do what is best for getting to the start of the playoffs with your 5 guys reasonably rested. Because we can talk about a number of things, micro things, hone in on the X's and O's and the tactics. And at the end of the day, I don't believe there is only one way for this team to win. And that is a criticism that I have of Tibbs, but it also, to me, I have to hold it to myself too. So I can't just sit here and be like, oh, the Knicks have to do X, Y, and Z to win. I actually don't believe that. I think their team is so well constructed. There are a number of ways this team can become a championship contender. Are there certain boxes they have to check? Absolutely. They have to shoot a requisite number of threes. They have to leverage that space to get to the rim. I agree. I think from an overall macro strategy perspective, there are a number of boxes they have to check. But I'm not arrogant enough to think that our one way is the way. And that, to me, is why I actually think that the most important issue is the minutes thing. Because there are a range of outcomes where the coaching staff deploys a strategy that wouldn't be intuitive to me that ends up working out really well, And I think all analysts should think that way. None of us have the answer. Even the coaching staff would admit we don't have the answers. We're trying to figure it out. The most important thing is trying these different options, these different lineups, these different strategies. You have Cat at the level, you have Cat and drop, you let Cat switch onto Tobias Harris. That's an example. You try these different strategies, different lineup combinations, get a gauge what works best, and get to the playoffs healthy. Because this team is a championship team, and I just think that has to be the number one priority.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I think that the tactical aspects of the game are not necessarily set in stone about what will be most effective, especially given, the players are humans and how things work, how well they're able to execute things, on a possession by possession basis over a long stretch of games. And so it's totally true. I do think there are things, like you kind of alluded to, that there are things that they do need to do to maximize their ceiling. And those are the things that I focus on, as well as, like you're saying, like kind of more macro things like the minute situation that we just know, at least with the information that we have, there is a better way forward if your goal is actually to contend for a title this year. And it just should be. So, I'm curious. We kind of hopped around a lot. I think we got a lot said. I'm curious if our audience, what you all think about what we said. I think there was like a lot of passion in a lot of what we were saying, but also, what did you extract from it? Would you agree with what we said? What are we missing? What are our blind spots? We really want to hear from you about that. Any last things you want to say, Geoff, before we get out of here?
Nope. Well heard by me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. We will have a part 2 to this episode, maybe up tomorrow, but until then, we'll see you next time. Go ahead and check out part 2. If you haven't, subscribe. We got a lot more great stuff coming up for you this season. And yeah, this has been Hot Hand Theory.